The views expressed are those of the program's host, not necessarily those of the staff and management of WSTU or WPSL. This program is the property of Port St. Lucie broadcasters and may not be rebroadcast without written permission. And now, Perspective with John and Joe and your hosts, John Pearson and Joe Doerr.
Good morning, everybody. This is Joe Doerr, and welcome to Perspective. And my partner right here is John Pearson. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Mr. Doerr. Boy, once again, the Democrats have given us just a plethora of things to talk about today. And I'd like to see if we could kick off with KeepAmericaAmerica.com. What the heck is that?
That's our opportunity to get our people to vote. That is the conservative wing of this nation to vote, and that is KeepAmericaAmerica.com. And that will give you the opportunity to get other people to vote. You have the opportunity to contact 10 people, and then you are asking each of those 10 people to contact another 10 people to make sure you get out there and vote.
Well, Mr. Doerr, it sounds like if you listen to what the Democrats are telling us, that we really don't have to go out and vote because the Republicans are going to do it all for us.
Well, they will get it in the mail. We don't have to go out and vote. You're right.
I like to see in my my inbox on email and also on my message that people are really kind these days. They're so kind. They're offering to send me a ballot, and then they're offering to pick it up as well.
Sure, and bring it in.
Yeah.
As long as you voted properly.
Well, obviously so. I think that's a lot of trust here in these people. They're awfully good. It does make me just a wee bit suspicious that the Democrats are hammering the idea that Trump is going to be obviously cheating. And yet, if he does not win somehow, that he is going to stay in office.
This election is going to be a nightmare if it's not a windfall one way or another.
I wonder how many attorneys are just loving life right about now, realizing they're going to have something to do here for the month of November, for the most part, probably till at least January, to fight this. They're already, I'm sure, got down the hanging chads, if there's even such things anymore, probably already in the coffer.
Well, you know, the threats by the Dems over replacing Ginsburg is really ridiculous. I'll make a commentary here, and that is, in retrospect, it was inevitable. The monumental frustration by that so near yet so far victory, or loss, I should say, in 2016, the left's been driven literally out of their minds by unexpected defeat and string of subsequent policy losses at the hands of the hated Trump. That's the big issue. The recent death of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg seems to have pushed the few remaining souls over the edge, with Twitter now rife with videos of young women screaming with rage into their cell phones. And this writer and CNN legal analyst, Jeffrey Toobin, also took the internet to advocate a full frontal assault on the GOP and worse, on the Constitution. Dems aren't powerless, he said. They can, one, abolish the filibuster, statehood for Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico, increase the number of federal judges, add 3 judges to the SCOTUS. In this column, he thinks that another 4 years of Trump is not survivable, that the campaign believes it's an absolute existential threat having Trump come in. And it's all based on hate, not facts. Like you said earlier, where are the crimes?
Yeah, if they would just give us one example that is an accurate example. This thing they've been going back and forth on, and now the New York Times has come out with just a blockbuster report about Trump's taxes. It is a blockbuster. This is the one. This is the smoking gun, and the gun all wrapped up into one. This is going to throw him out of office. There's absolutely no doubt about it. Of course, I think what they're finding out is it's kind of a thud. People are going, look, he's guy's a billionaire. He's going to have years where he pays lots of taxes. He'll have years where he doesn't pay any taxes. And by the way, the IRS law, or the rule that he based his taxes on, was an Obama era IRS ruling.
And the IRS certainly isn't going to be standing by and not checking out his taxes on a regular basis. I'm sure when it first came up, some of the agents had to be saying, let's take a look and see what we have.
Years ago, Joe, I had the pleasure of working for a gentleman named Jim Moran. Just an outstanding guy. He was basically originally out of Chicago. Then he came down here and started up a big distributorship. Just a sensational guy. Started out as a gas station owner. Then he got some used cars on the side and just built himself up and to eventually being a multi-billionaire. The guy was just fantastic human being, treated everybody just really well. But in the big offices down in Deerfield Beach, which is where they have their main office, they had one particular office that was just set up for the IRS.
Huh.
The IRS had a permanent office within our office, just doing their taxes, going over taxes. So anytime you hear of these billionaires that are having some type of tax issue, I would guess that somewhere in the Trump organization, somewhere in one of his buildings, is an IRS office.
Well, I would suspect certainly the accountants that he has are concerned about every bit of his activities, including day to day. I'm sure every decision that's made as far as another building or another business or another project is run through his tax people first, or at least before the decision is made.
Joe, does it make you suspicious at all that when the New York Times, when asked about this, the information, where they got it, how they got it, and so on, well, we can't divulge that. That's information that we can't. Well, how about telling us who your witnesses are that you extensively interviewed? No, we can't discuss that. So we're here now where we have to trust reporters. Remember, we need to trust reporters because they would never exaggerate or they would never omit a pertinent fact, would they?
Well, a Trump representative just stated yesterday that it was basically all false information with few exceptions.
Well, personally, I just don't care. I look at what the president does as far as helping the country now. I care a lot more about what he does, even more so than what he says. Now, all that being given, I realize when a president says something that can spook the markets, it can spook other countries. I got all that. But I look at Trump as fulfilling, from what I can see, most of his promises that he's promised the American public. You vote me in, I will do such and such. And I think he has.
He's made every effort. And the only things that he hasn't really completed are the issues where he was getting feedback or whether he was getting fought by the Democrats. For instance, the wall. They wouldn't let him do the wall. They don't want any part of that. In fact, they talk about eliminating the wall if they get into office.
How about the Middle East peace? That just years ago was the greatest thing on the planet to have happen. It's never going to happen, John Kerry, never going to take place. There will constantly be somebody after the throat of Israel, and that some of that may be true. But Trump has just broken new ground with these treaties that they're setting up over there with Israel.
Well, Kerry made a comment. It was years ago, but he reaffirmed, really reaffirmed the fact that there would be no Middle East peace without a Palestinian-Israel deal, period. He said it cannot happen, cannot happen. When Trump came into office, he just disregarded all the president's activities for the last 30 years and said, let's re-look at this in a fresh way, in a business-like way. What are the realities? Don't take the information from the prior administrations and use those principles to start building your efforts on. You can't. He started right from scratch. Where is everybody? Like a chess player.
Well, I think Trump also needed to, whether he did it by accident or not. I believe that for what you can understand now, what you could read now, is that the Obama administration was very lax as far as spreading the information that they were involved with to the new administration. It was almost like they just got to keep all this stuff secret. Don't tell them too much. Tell them enough, but don't tell them too much information, which I hadn't heard of before. I don't know. I can't speak from personal experience. I would think that for the betterment of this country, for the nation, that an outgoing president would be very positive to the next administration as far as giving them information.
Yeah, if you want a smooth transition of power, you have to be able to supply information like a race. You pass the baton on to the new people that are going to be running for the next 4 years. And that didn't happen at all. They did quite the opposite and started an investigation with the Russian collusion.
So the Democrats now are claiming that this is unheard of. It's unprecedented that a president with just a couple of months to go prior to the election of a new president would dare to try to put a Supreme Court justice on, and that he really should wait till after the election and then go ahead and put that on. And yet, once again, when you look at these facts, when you look at these statistics of what this has been over the years, that this is actually quite a normal practice.
Well, here's historical record supports that position exactly. 14 presidents have appointed 21 justices during presidential election years. A half dozen presidents that were lame ducks, that was after they had lost the election, filed Supreme Court seats through their successors, before the successors had been elected. So, I mean, this is not something new.
Well, particularly if the Senate was going to change.
Well, yeah, particularly, right. 1/3 of the U.S. presidents appointed Supreme Court justices during election years. That's 1/3. That's pretty sizable.
So why don't we see in the press, whether it's on TV or newspapers or radio, why don't we see a backlash where the so-called fact checkers come in and go, hey, that's not right, or you didn't fill in all the blanks here, which you need to in order to give it some context.
Well, that's one of the greatest concerns, and that is the fact checkers are factually not covering the liberal side. They're letting the liberal side flow through, and they're stopping all of the conservative information flowing. And then when they get caught, they say, oops, mistake in our algorithm.
Right, and it was absence of malice. Anyway, so we really can't be held liable. I know that Trump talks about that he would like to see some type of libel being able to be charged when people come out and intentionally mislead or put out improper information.
Well, Justice Thomas is talking about revisiting that law, the Sullivan Law, which was a New York law about guns. But anyway, this was a Sullivan situation, and it was a writer, I think, that was found able to come out with misinformation because he didn't have malice.
Yeah, the problem we run into, and I could see where that could be fraught with danger. I could see where you could silence people who truly do want to come out and say something and go, well, I don't know, I don't have enough money. I've got some experience in court proceedings, and it really does boil down to who's got the most cash before you go to court.
That's true. And another big problem is the tech companies. They are really not in favor of Trump at all. So there's a lot of pressure out there that could affect this election and be via the social media and tech companies supporting Trump, getting misinformation out. And you also have CNN, MSNBC, ABC, CBS. They're all giving one side of the story. And people that listen to these programs believe it. And when you talk to somebody that listens only to these avenues of information, it becomes very difficult to try and say, hey, listen, here is the facts. And they have already assumed the facts being on the liberal side.
Well, they're not going to be positive, considering, particularly with Trump. I get a kick out of it when I hear that he's racist and he's divisive. And but the reporters don't look at him and ask the question of, can you give us an example? Can you give us an example of that? Just give us one. I liked it 6 months back, maybe a year back. I believe it was on Tucker Carlson, and a lady came on, very smug, very liberal, and she had a big book in front of her. It looked like it had just huge amounts of information, just probably the key to everything, the key to life, even, Joe. And she made a comment. He said, "Can you give us just one example?" She goes, "I could give you 100 examples." He goes, "No, just give us one." And they came in on it. They zoomed in on her, and she started to, put her fingers to her lips, and she's turning the pages. And
Yep.
I mean, she's going to have 100 examples. Well, she doesn't have even one example. And I remember the famous line that Carlson used on her. He said, "You've come woefully unprepared."
I really like him. He's
She
great.
didn't have one example. I think it would sure help out if somebody could go, here's an example of him. When I say this, here's the example. You just don't get it. Look, let's face it. The guy could be irritating. He's a blowhard. He's all that. But gosh darn, by golly, he gets things done. He says he's going to do it. He's the most open president that I've ever seen. How many presidents talk? Sometimes, unfortunately, how many presidents do as many interviews, particularly impromptu interviews, as he does?
Everybody wanted transparency. Now they have so much transparency they can't stand it.
And boy, he shoots from the cup too. I've seen it before where you look at him and go, no, just say that and then be quiet. It's like when you're selling a product. Once you make the sale, be quiet.
You mentioned a couple of weeks ago about him putting a hand grenade into a situation, and that is it. He says some things just to stir the pot, and everybody gets so upset, and it makes his point.
Well, I'll tell you what. You ever notice that nobody seems to be bothering with his cabinet? His cabinet's just busy back there doing a lot of the legwork, doing all the menial stuff and the macro and micro stuff. While he's able to go ahead and take all the shots from the media, you've got all these other guys back there getting stuff done.
Well, that's how they got this deal done in the Mideast.
Yep.
Basically, if the deep state knew what was going on, they would have put an end to it because they have financial interests in keeping the Mideast a firestorm or a potential firestorm. And it was done before they realized it. But Trump had his group of people, including his son-in-law, going over there, making these commitments, putting this puzzle together, and all of a sudden, bang, it was right in their face. How did that happen?
But I thought he was anti-Semitic. See, that's another thing. He's an anti-Semitic. How does that work?
I don't know.
His daughter has converted. His son-in-law is Jewish, and yet he's an anti-Semite. I don't.
As far as Israel is concerned, is the best president that they've ever had to deal with. He's been terrific for that country.
Let's talk about some of these things that really just don't make sense. You have the Democrats saying that this president has profited in his businesses, his hotels, like no other president ever has. Of course, we have not had a president like a Donald Trump prior to Donald Trump. And of course, the emolument clause comes up because everybody wants to stay in his hotels, and it's a way of basically bribing him. Because you really do need to come in and bribe a multi-billionaire. Well, they go on and they chastise the guy for taking money and all that kind of stuff, and he's real wealthy. Well, now they're going, wait a minute, he's not all that wealthy, and he's actually losing money.
Oh, that's why that's the derogatory issue with his not paying enough taxes. That's because he's been losing millions of dollars. It's just amazing they could not find anything positive to say about him at all.
And yet he's being able to write that. I don't know how he did it. Wrote it off, write downs, whatever it is. And yet that was an Obama IRS ruling.
Of course,
they passed that. So but I don't think we're going to be seeing that very often. Has he been up for any kind of crime? Is the IRS penalizing him for committing a crime, any type of tax evasion at all?
No, you've got the New York State courts are after him, and for no apparent reason.
Yeah, well, the attorneys in New York, U.S. attorneys don't like him. And the state attorneys don't like him up there.
Not at all.
So I think you'll always see that kind of deal. I think the best thing the American public could do is to make sure that Biden does not get in. Who, in their right mind, would say, "I'm going to vote for a guy who's going to raise my taxes because, by golly, I want to pay more. I'm not paying enough." Now, when I hear people who basically say that, my first response is, "Well, what's keeping you from just writing a little bigger check? If you have to pay $20,000 this year in taxes, come on now, step up to the pump, Dr. Ruth. Send them a check in for another 10 grand, another 15 grand. If that's how you feel, then go ahead and do it." You other people are praised. When you hear these really outlandish statements by people who go, "Well, you know what? That man's a billionaire, and he pays less as a percent than his secretary pays."
That's such a hogwash, right?
Yes, it is. But it's basically looking at it and saying, "The American public, you guys are so ignorant, unwashed. You don't understand. I'm talking about one situation. That person over there is taking it as income, and they don't put that together."
No, they don't.
So once again, they're telling the truth, but not all the truth.
No, well, it's just innuendos, and innuendos will lead people that don't like them to not like them further or more.
But wouldn't common sense tell you, Joe, that if you hear a writer say something like that, and you're thinking, wait a minute, he's not saying or she's not saying all the truth here, and trying to put a spin on it, which is not a good spin. So therefore, if he or she is doing it on this subject, why wouldn't I think she's doing it or he's doing it on all subjects, which they do?
Mm-hmm. And as far as Biden is concerned, he is definitely in favor of the Green New Deal, which is going to hurt the oil industry. And I was reading this morning, too, he's looking to allow people, the general public, to sue policemen. Now, how about a surgeon What does it cost the surgeon for insurance?
It's their main
Hundreds of thousands of dollars
main
a year.
expense. That's their main expense.
If you're a policeman, it would probably be more because you're in jeopardy of having to cover a lawsuit much more with police than with even surgeons.
Well, particularly because it's would be mostly political. You can see it now. Look how the Black Lives Matters and the Antifa, they get away with all sorts of things because you just don't want to say anything bad about them.
Well, they're losing their support to a great degree.
Well,
right
they are
now.
they are because I think they're seeing just all this total trash talk and BS and all these accusations going out there, and people are finally going, wait a minute, I saw with my own eyes somebody attacking a federal court building in Portland. I
Mhm.
watched it. I watched people go in and break around the barricades and try to lock these poor law enforcement people inside the buildings and then burn it down.
Mhm.
For crying out loud. Well, no, they're mostly peaceful protesting. The greatest deal was recently when that CNN reporter was out there going, and the mostly peaceful protesters. And meanwhile, there's a huge fire going on right behind them. There's a building burning down. And it was outstanding.
Somebody said it might have been Tucker Carlson when he mentioned the fact that they said it's 93% peaceful, and he goes, "Well, that's great, you know." And when I go to the doctor, he said, "Listen, we've got your cancer 93% taken care of." I mean, it is what it is. You either have violence or you don't have violence, and there are billions of dollars of damage to the witness to the fact that there has been some actual violence.
It's,
not to mention deaths.
It's just like that famous line with Mrs. Lincoln. Besides that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play? So I would think that would probably counter right in on that type of thing. So now, what the Democrats now are doing the really mature thing, and they're saying, well, you if you go ahead and try to get this nominee through, and by the way, they can do it. The Republicans have the votes.
They will do it unless there's some defections of some sort.
Well, of course, you've already got the usual Collins and McCloskey. Of course, they're already saying no, and then you can't trust Romney. So you're
right. Romney did commit himself.
Yeah, I don't trust the old bird anymore.
Well, he did leave one. He said if that person qualifies, or maybe he could get talked out of the fact that she qualifies or not. But other than that, he really has to go along with the program.
I like the fact that they all loved her when she was being committed before, and now, of course, they don't like her. That she's a religious zealot, and she's liable to go and single-handedly overturn the abortion issue. Just single-handedly.
Okay, I'll get back to you in a minute. Make it 2 minutes. Okay, we're back. This is Perspective with Joe Dewar and
John Pearson.
John.
And Joe, thank you very much. By the way, I remind everybody you're listening to WPSL and 1590 AM. You also listen to WSTU 1450 AM. And if you got a comment you'd like to make, particularly if you'd like to disagree with Mr. Dewar, call in at 772-220-9788.
You know what? I must be right. Nobody's called to disagree with me.
Well,
Not yet.
they may be clogging the lines, Mr. Dewar. Now, Mr. Dewar, I understand you had a couple of interesting dreams.
Well, yes, I had a dream. This is legitimate.
Yeah.
This was probably about a week ago. I'm talking to President Trump. I'm in a group. He's walking by and he stops to say hello. And I said to him, Mr. Trump, when you have this debate, would you just not call him any names and just stay with the facts? He smiled at me, turned around and walked away. How about that for a dream?
Did he call you a name?
No, he didn't. He just smiled at me.
All right, so that was a good dream then.
Yes, it was a good dream. I had another dream too.
What's that?
I was out looking for a car.
Yeah.
And I just was so nervous going in there to negotiate because you know how those people are. They just want to get all the money they can from you and they want to sell you everything they have to sell. And you know what happened? You came in and I didn't have to say a word. I saved money and I had no stress. How good is that?
Well, I'm
is
hoping,
that possible?
Yes, it is. It is not only possible, it's probable. Yes, thank you. Nice lead-in, by the way. Nice segue, as they say.
Segue.
No, I do that for a living. You find a car or a truck or van, whatever you'd like. You want to buy it, lease it, new or used, whatever it is, traded, no trade-in, whatever. And you give me a call, and I meet you wherever you're going to buy the car that day. And what I do is that when it's time to negotiate the price of that car, you just sit back, relax, and I'll take over and do it all for you. And we're going to get the price you want, most likely lower than what you expected, whether it's a lease, whether it's a straight out buy, purchase, cash, finance, whatever it is, trade-ins, whatever. And I make it easy for you. There's no hassles. First of all, when you go into a car dealership, the salespeople there, they have a job to do. And their job is to sell you at the price on that vehicle, that the price that the management wants to sell it at. Well, we don't always get our own way, but you don't have to pay that full price. The average sticker price markup, you're going to pay about $3,400 to buy that car. Some people end up paying $7,000 or $8,000. Some people end up paying about $500. You want to be the person paying about $500. You don't want to be that person paying all the money. So have me come in. I'll take care of it and make it easy for you. You don't pay me until you are 100% satisfied and happy with your purchase. My whole goal is to have you tell your friends, say, hey, listen, call John Pearson. He will take care of it for you. I can do this over the phone also. So if you're in, we have 4 listeners that we talked to the other day in San Francisco. I can do it. So I can help you out buy a car in San Francisco or Montana or Texas over the phone, which I've done recently in Houston, Texas. So give me a call. It's John Pearson, 772-485-8007. That's 772-485-8007. Pearson, John Pearson.
Well, what do you know about that?
By the way, you can also pull us up under CarBuyersService.com. That's CarBuyersService.com.
Plural, car buyers service.
Yeah.
Got it. You know, BLM,
Yes.
Antifa
Mm-hmm.
are Marxist groups.
Yes.
And some people don't really know what that means. Marx was unhappy with society, climate at his time. This was many years ago, when the working class, what was known then as the proletariat, was being exploited by the upper middle class, or the bourgeoisie, by using the labor of the working class to fatten their wallets. Marx envisioned a revolutionary society in which everyone's needs are met and no class divisions exist. The system is also known as socialism. Does that sound familiar? With Marx's vision for a perfect society. He began with a bottoms-up approach. That's to say, the needs of the society should begin with the economic need at the base. In other words, you don't start the company. Let's start with the people that have needs, then build upwards to construct the economy and the economic climate that will provide for those needs. Finally, he held at capitalism in complete disdain. claiming that it would be the ruination of all societies. Well, that doesn't seem to be true, leaving them no alternative but to claim socialism as the sole answer to survival. Marx contended that capitalism would inevitably lead to a revolution by the working class, and the working class is not in a revolutionary state right now, due to the strain that's placed upon the oppressed workers. Our workers aren't oppressed these days, thus separating them from their own humanity. So he has a whole picture of maybe how things used to be many years ago. Right now, workers have plenty of rights. Workers seem to be happy. The society seems to be working well from an economic perspective. So this whole thing about Marxists and socialism and BLM and Antifa really don't fit with today's real world.
No, and that's why they have to change that. They have to change the whole storyline there in order to make something fit on that. My background, Joe, as you know, has been in business all my life. I've worked for large companies and worked for myself for many years as well. I have never been in a meeting where the bosses, the people who ran the company, would try to do something to hurt the workers, to hurt the associates, the employees. It just didn't happen.
Right.
Now, people who are ignorant, people who are uneducated, well, yeah, the management, they're off to themselves. Look, if you can't take good people, the people who actually get the work done. I used to have, I don't know how many millions of dollars worth of computer systems at my business. And somebody one day said, well, do you know how to work all these systems? Not one. I don't know how to work any of them. But I've got 30 people here that do, and they do a great job.
And if they don't like you, they're not going to do the job well. If you don't treat them well, they're not going to treat you well. A good management, good leader is someone that works with the people, has the affinity of those people, and gets the most out of them.
And exactly right. And you try to take good care of your people as well. We had people along the way that would get sick or they have cancer or whatever. Well, by golly, we cared about them. We cared enough to take care of them. It wasn't something, oh, well, we've got to do this. No, that was Joe or Bill or Susie. Somebody needed some assistance. Somebody needed some help. They were there for us. We were there for them. Now, what happens when you do that? Well, the other people who work for you, they talk to those people. Well, you know, Mr. Pearson really did this, or Mr. Doerr did this. They really helped us out in time. Well, how do you think that makes an employee or an associate feel when they hear that somebody else was taken really good care of? Gee, maybe they think that that's going to happen to them as well, that somebody's going to take good care of me as well. I think that makes a great worker when they know that you care enough about them. And that's how business works. Obviously, these people who want to take over this country have got to drag down capitalism and make it out like a bad thing, because they can't run this country in an autocratic way if there's capitalism. We've got to tear that down.
Mm-hmm.
That's why this pandemic thing has come along at a great time. They love to see this thing going. That's why they don't like our governor, Florida's governor, opening the state up. Let's go. Let's get back into business.
Yeah, socialism is the powers at the top, and that's everybody else, whatever.
So
capitalism, everybody has an opportunity.
How much of a real threat? Obviously, it's not. It's a threat, and it won't be just an off-the-cuff threat if the Democrats get in this time. They want to punish Trump for even suggesting that he's going to put in a Supreme Court justice during this time before the election. Obviously, the Democrats wanted to do that because this is where the rub has come in. That before the last election, yes, it was about a year to go, and you had Obama wanted to put one in. The difference he had was
he didn't have the Senate.
He didn't have the Senate. Exactly right. A huge difference. But yet he wanted to put one in.
And that's fine. But
so what's the difference now, though?
The difference is we have the Senate.
We have the Senate.
And if the Democrats weren't, if the shoe was on the other foot, they would follow through. And that's what I hate about politics. It's whatever fits today and it doesn't fit a year from now, well, we'll just change my whole attitude on it, my whole belief in it.
They've got to remember some of the old lines. And I remember that smart aleck line with that smirk on his face when he said elections have consequences.
Elections have consequences.
Really?
Right.
Well, you might be looking at one of the consequences right now. They voted in a Republican Senate. And the Republican Senate is going to be the one that's going to get a Supreme Court justice in on this deal. So you're right. Elections do have consequences.
Well, the Democrats did away with the filibuster, and they were warned, you'll be sorry someday. Well, here is the someday.
Well, I liked, and I don't always like Lindsey Graham and what he has to say. I think he's kind of a blowhard. Everything's a crisis and so on, and he's going to do that. And then he never does anyway. It's all hearsay. But I like the fact that his last line about this deal was, well, just remember Kavanaugh. And what they did to Judge Kavanaugh was a crime. The way they accused him just making up stuff, allowing people to come in and say whatever they wanted to say without any type of, well, do you have any proof?
There's a series that's going to come on television, on cable, on the 1st of October. And what it is going to be a review of the Kavanaugh hearing, which would be a wonderful thing for you to be able to watch, because it will be in conjunction with what's going to happen, I think, starting on the 12th with this current judge.
What's going to happen on this? Speaking of that in a roundabout way, what's going to happen on these debates? I think this is going to be an incredibly fascinating deal. Do you think they're going to put as much heat on? Well, Trump will develop his own heat, but do you think they'll develop and put that same kind of heat on Biden?
No, I don't think so. But I will say this, that Trump asked for a drug test, and it may sound stupid to do that, but it's not, because Biden taking some Adderall could actually be charged up for an hour and a half. And we need a president that's charged up all the time. Trump is like unbelievable, the amount of energy that he has. And I don't see Biden do that. He's doing this thing where they call the lid, where at least 9 times up to September 24th, 9 times since the beginning of the month, that he stopped his activities at 9 a.m. in the morning and took the rest of the day off. Now, who does that at this point in an election? You have to be out there knocking on doors and making speeches and doing interviews and just staying active. But he hasn't been doing that.
If Joe Biden knocked at your door at 8:30 in the morning, would you open it up?
Well, we're not talking about knocking on doors,
Okay.
literally,
Yeah.
figuratively.
I like the fact.
Well,
that,
I might open the door for
I like
him.
the fact that he's very careful to wear his mask around people. I although I like masks, I think people who look like I do, we do real well with masks. I'm all for it. I think we should have to wear masks from now on.
What frees you up to do what you want to do without
Yeah,
anybody knowing it, right?
Exactly. Well, he's a handsome man. How do you know? Oh, I don't.
He told me.
I know he told me it was. Yeah.
He never lied.
He keeps showing a picture of 30 years ago. I don't know that. So who is the heck is this lady, Amy Coney Barrett? She seems like a pretty cool lady.
Well, she's quite the student. She's been number 1 in the class. In fact, I think that Trump was told that by the professor at law school in Notre Dame that she was the best student he ever had, which is pretty highly regarded, I would say. And she worked for Scalia for a while. Mm-hmm. She believes in the same philosophy he believes in. So she will be carrying on the same way he did when he was in the court, which would be a very positive thing in keeping our Constitution safe from being interpreted and changed. Interpretation is one thing. We don't want the Constitution changing.
Well, they've got to be freaking out, the Democrats, that you've got such a staunch liberal in Ginsburg, and now you could be going over to pretty much of a starch conservative.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what they're going crazy over, and they obviously are really counting on the idea that Trump is going to lose. I believe truly, I think Trump's going to win by a landslide.
Well, if he doesn't, we're going to have a problem. And the only issue is we won't really know, even if he wins bigly, as he says, election day. We don't know what's going to happen with all of the ballots that have to be counted over the next couple of weeks.
I think you've got them set up for that. I think that's an automatic. I would love to see how many attorneys have already been hired, what type of apparatus, legal apparatus has been set up. But you do know that's going to go the day the election starts, of course it's already started, but the day the election starts, it's already going to be protests. You watch. The first newscast of the morning of the 3rd is going to be, there's some trouble at polling booth, blah, blah. And like mishandling right off the bat, so they can get people who have not voted yet, perhaps into the afternoon, to go, oh, this thing's already fraudulent.
The more confusion, the better for them. And I understand the number was 600 attorneys in round numbers.
Really,
the Democrats had pulled together.
Well, that would seem to make sense here.
And that's Justin Stewart.
Who are these social media fact checkers? That's just I heard that. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for throwing that in there.
Okay.
Don't forget to try the meatloaf. The social media fact checkers. Who are these people?
There are people that are signed within the organization. Let's say it's Facebook, or some of the other social media platforms, which I'm unfamiliar with, Twitter, they have people that are assigned, internal people from the organization, that will decide whether something is within the framework of their thinking or not. And if it isn't, they'll knock it down.
So what a surprise then. And virtually everything Trump says is misleading and fraudulent. I don't see them getting on Biden very much on this stuff.
No, they don't. And the people that have had their contacts or their communication cut off by these organizations have been in a position where they were told a week later or a couple of days later that was a mistake in our algorithm, which I had said earlier.
That, by the way, was a fascinating story that you told me, and I had heard something about it, but you explained it in detail, which I thought was just a really cool explanation of how this thing with the pandemic got started and then completely screwed up.
Yeah, I read an article in reference to this pandemic, and it was actually started with a computer program that was set up by a high school student, and the high school student put together this program and fed information into it that if they closed schools and if they closed down businesses, what would happen. And this was told that was going to happen. So it was not information that the computer spit out and said, okay, this is what's going to happen. They actually told the computer in advance what was going to happen if these things were done. So consequently, this program was then shown to, I think, the Bush administration at one point. And he basically did a poll, or they did a poll, and the poll was to the general public to see whether this closing down schools and closing down society would be the right thing to do. And they said, no, it wasn't. Then they did another poll because that answer didn't suit them. They did another poll, and the poll was really to more political groups, people in power, and they said that would be a good idea. And there was an individual, a fellow by the name of, what's his name? D.A. Henderson, who was he explained in the New York Times, he's the leader of the international effort to eradicate smallpox and had been named by President Bush to help oversee the nation's biodefense efforts after the 2001 terrorist attacks. Henderson pushed back, saying it made no sense to force schools to close or public gatherings to stop. Indeed, if authorities adopted such policies, he rightly discerned the result would be significant disruption of the social functioning of the communities and possible serious economic problems. Henderson had a vast experience and broad knowledge in this area. His advice: we should tough it out, let the pandemic spread, treat people who get sick, and work quickly to develop a vaccine to prevent it from coming back. The CDC didn't know what to do if and when a pandemic should hit. Go to Henderson's plan, or go with the high school plan. They went with the high school plan. And unfortunately, this experiment, they had this in the wings waiting to happen. And now this experiment with our country has really turned out to be not very good. In fact, if we go back to the 57, 58 flu epidemic, 50% of the population had that flu. And we just toughed it out, as Anderson had suggested. And we never closed anything down.
Joe, do you think that anything had to do with it would be, for example, they had to come into this election trying to figure out how they're going to defeat Trump with the economy soaring, absolutely kicking tail. And everybody's numbers from Black American young men, everybody's numbers were soaring as far as employment and income were going up. So they had one thing they needed to do. They needed to trash Trump's economy. How are they going to do that?
It was the most ideal way here.
And then the pandemic shows up. By golly, writes something right into our lap. Well, we have to do this. It's so good for the economy. And of course, now they turn around and go, look what happened to Trump's economy. Yeah, but you wanted us to close it all down. It was, state by state. But you guys were advocating for it as well, and Trump was trying to do the best thing. Nobody really knew what to do. I would defy anybody out there to say exactly. I mean, even the doctors go back and forth on the mask, for example. Yes, you got to wear a mask. No, they really don't do a lot. Well, they're the greatest thing since sliced bread. Well, no, they don't. Well, yeah, they do. So you really can't get it there either.
No, and this whole argument that Biden has that Trump has done a terrible job is just baloney. I mean, Trump responded promptly to the virus, shut down direct access from China in January 31, and was accused of xenophobia hysteria by Biden. And Fauci, the country's leading epidemiologist, yes, said that there's no reason for Americans to change the way that they were living. That's in the very beginning. The country and the world were going and groping forward, looking for some way to handle this virus. Nobody really knew what to do.
I have yet to see the number, and I've asked for it a few times, and you get people go, oh yeah, yes, no, but no. I wonder what the actual answer is. What is the number of people who die daily or die monthly or they die on average yearly in the United States? Has it gone up? Or is it the same, except more people have died from this particular disease? Are we seeing, they say there's 200,000 deaths from the pandemic. Is there 200,000 more deaths than normal in any given year?
The percentage has gone way down as far as deaths are concerned. And again, the largest number of deaths are people that have health issues,
right,
and people that are older age, or a combination thereof.
But I'm asking Joe, is there an increase in actual deaths in this country over and above what there normally is? So let's say we lose 1 million people a year. I'll just throw out a number.
Oh, I understand. Yes.
Is there now 1.2 million? I mean, is there some type of increase, or is it no? The same amount of people have died, but people have died because of this particular pandemic.
I would bet that if you look at the number, say 6 months or whenever the statistics are out, when you look at 2020 versus 2018 and 19, you'll find that the number of deaths are probably pretty much the same, because we lost 200,000 people to the virus. Well, guess what? We probably lost an equal number to some other situations where people didn't go to the hospital because they had issues, because people were committing suicide, because people got more involved in drugs, because people were killing each other. I mean, when you put all the numbers together, I'll bet there's going to be very little difference in terms of the number of people that have died in a given year on average.
What had they predicted? They had predicted some ungodly amount of people.
Oh, we're talking million more. Yeah. Oh, yes.
And then even out of these, say, 200,000 that they're claiming now, how many are for sure died of that, or just complications of that and had something else, heart problems?
I have been told, and I don't know that for sure, but my understanding was that hospitals would get a greater cash flow from people that died from the coronavirus than dying from something else. So if you were in a motorcycle accident and you brought into the hospital and you had corona, that was the coronavirus, in spite of the fact that your head was knocked off on the motorcycle.
Right. Well, I think that has something to do with the cash, like a bounty that you got if somebody had the
right.
the coronavirus.
Some sort of a money that they would get.
The number they bantered back and forth was, say, something like 6%. Actually died directly.
Much less. Oh yeah. No, we're talking the latest numbers that I had seen were much more of a 1% number as opposed to 6%. It dropped dramatically.
Yeah,
dramatically.
Where did the origin of social distancing come from?
Well, that came from that high school program. That high school program, they put that in there. Would social distancing make a change? And then they answered their own question and said, yes, it would. And that was used as a formula. I mean, it was so totally ridiculous how they came up with that.
So basically, they got into a circle argument, and by the time they were done, or a discussion, got done, somebody said, well, here's the answer. Oh, here's the answer.
Well, 57, exactly. 57, 58 flu epidemic. I can remember that there were people sick all around me. I didn't get it.
Joe, was that 1856?
No, it was 1756.
Okay, I'm just asking.
Yeah, and in any case, the point being that it was something that we accepted. I mean, we weren't that far away from polio back in those days, so it was like,
my mom,
hey, a flu. What's a flu?
Yeah.
You know, big deal.
Yeah.
But if you stayed healthy, or you had a reasonably good immune system, it wasn't that much of an issue. You get sick and you get over it.
Hey, we're almost running out of time. How about the Durham report? Is that going to come out in time before the election?
No, it's not going to come out, I don't think, because they don't want to affect this election. And if Biden gets in, You'll never hear about
Doesn't
it
matter anyway.
ever again. Yeah, I won't hear it again. In spite of the fact that Trump probably lost the Congress due to the fact that the Russian collusion was going on for those 2 years, which was affecting the election. And now that the answer for it, to prove that he was correct and they were wrong, they don't want to bring that out. That should have been talked about all summer.
The stuff they're coming out with as far as the collusion, you talk about collusion within the FBI, is just off the charts. What they did and what they changed and how they came out and said things. And then early on when Trump would go, they've done this to me, they're spying, or they're using whatever terms he used. Oh my God, can you believe he's using that term? Oh my. And then you go, of course you realize after a while,
and it turns out to be right
it's
anyway.
all true.
Yeah.
He just doesn't use the exact terms. And of course they attack the actual terminology as opposed to the validity of something like that happening. I think it's really atrocious.
They're supposed to be interviewing Comey on the Hill, so I think today or tomorrow, or within the next day or so. And he's going to skate through that. You know, they don't seem to have the unis to like pin this guy down because he was the leader of the pack in this thing completely.
Well, the Republicans are going to do the same thing as the Democrats. The Republicans are going to be putting themselves in a position, posturing to look good for any type of advertising. They can do. The Democrats are going to do the same thing. They're going to be kissing up to Comey all they can. There's a lot of stuff I don't think has come out yet. I think in the next 4 years, if we had another Trump administration, we'd find out. If it's a Biden administration, it's all gone. I wonder if Woodward would consider coming out with a book that was more pro-conservative.
He's got time for a bulletin anyway between now and election day. How about let's get back to one more time. KeepAmericaAmerica.com. Get on there. Help get the vote out.
And boy, you talk about an election where we have to do it. Folks, you've been listening to Perspective with Joe Doer and John Pearson. We had another hour went by, Mr. Doer, very, very quickly. I really enjoyed it once again.
Me too. Great, John. Thank you.
So, Lord willing, we'll be somewhere on Monday at 10 o'clock next week, and we'll keep that up. Folks, thanks for listening.
Have a great week.